Overspending on Pokemon cards is one of the most common problems that collectors face today. Now, obviously, collecting Pokemon cards as an adult is very different than it was when we were kids. And a big reason for that is because a lot of us have something called bills and kids, and we have shopping to do. And even though a lot of us are like big kids ourselves and we'd like to spend all of our money on Pokemon cards, we all know that we can't really do that. So learning how to actually collect is a key part of participating in this hobby because believe me, it gets very expensive. Though something that's funny, and it probably should be said. So when I was a kid and I have to go places with my mum, I kind of always wanted her to buy me a booster pack if I came along. And mum always found it funny how much I loved Pokemon cards even back then. And even when I was a kid, I always thought, you know what, when I get older, if I ever get rich one day, I'm gonna use that money to buy Pokemon cards. And I've kind of thought that into existence because even now as an adult, I mean, the first thing I wanna do when I get some money is buy Pokemon cards. Though, you know, being an avid collector and having spent way too much on Pokemon cards and learned a lot from it, I feel like I'm in a very good position to cover the topics in today's video. So the first habit to save money is actually less a bit of a habit, but more of a mindset shift. Though it's that understanding collecting cards is the equivalent of chasing the horizon, you won't ever get there. One thing that people don't speak about is that there's really no limit on how expensive collecting can get, and it's kind of limitless in a way. For example, when you start out, you may be thinking that spending $20 on a single Pokemon card is a lot. Like, wow, I just spent 20 bucks on a Pokemon card? But then you might soon find out that there's another level. You'll notice that someone's paying $200 for a Pokemon card. And then you'll see, wait, there's other people that spend $3,000 on a PSA 10 slab. And then there's even the next level where you'll have these whales who are literally purchasing black label Poncho Pikachus and PSA 10 vintage cards. So even though this isn't a habit that you want to learn, it's more about having a practice of mindfulness about collecting. It's incredibly important to understand that Pokemon cards don't have a limit. And I think that's something that needs to be burnt into every viewer's brain about the hobby. Because there's no point for me to be speaking about the habits to save money when, you know, every viewer needs to really understand that there's no limit to collecting. You can literally create endless goals when it comes to collecting, and it's designed like that as well. It's not designed to have it all. The purpose of collecting is to have your own path in it. It's like saying that you want to read every book ever written in history, or you want to watch every single movie ever made. We all know those goals are not possible, and the mindset of collecting should be very similar to that. It's about enjoying your own experience with collecting. Now also, I wanted to say, if you have been enjoying the video, my name is Phil, and I do cover a lot of topics relating to Pokemon's TCG. Definitely feel free to subscribe for consistent Pokemon TCG content. Now, habit 2 is learning to self-assess. Know when you're buying for ego versus true passion. So one thing about collecting, it is very ego-driven. A lot of people tie their self-worth to their collections. And the reason I've done this and why a lot of us do it is because the time, effort, and passion it takes to build a collection, and a lot of your self-worth can be tethered to this. Though a habit to learn is understanding how to self-assess yourself when you're purchasing Pokemon cards or any collectibles in general. And what I mean by this is, learn when you're buying collectibles from a place of ego versus genuine passion. So from my perspective, a lot of my friends know I collect, and there was one person in another friendship circle who was just as passionate about collecting as me, and everyone knew about their wild Blastoise collection. So they would seek out Blastoise cards, and I'm talking about like the real wanted collectibles, and all these amazing Blastoise cards. So a few years ago, I was browsing eBay, and I saw a pretty cheap listing for a high-grade Plasma Storm Blastoise. And even though it was a good price for the time, I was actually considering buying it. And then I thought, you know what, it's time that I buy this Blastoise. And all night, I was just thinking to myself, hey, should I pull the trigger and purchase this super expensive chase? Now, what's very important to understand, while I was debating with myself on whether or not I should buy it, the reality is I had zero connection to the card. I mean, I like Blastoise as a Pokemon, but I'm definitely not a crazy fan. There was no genuine demand within me that wanted this card. It was purely coming out of ego and competition. So I was considering purchasing a very expensive chase card that was well over $1,000 at the time, purely to keep up with the Joneses. Anyway, long story short, I decided not to purchase it, but in that moment, I learned a key lesson, which is the huge power that ego has when it comes to collectibles. I mean, it's funny, right? Because in hindsight, and now when I'm looking looking back, I just think how stupid the thought process was in the first place. As the months have gone on and I've become a bit of a bigger YouTube channel, I mean, I'm definitely nowhere near the GOATs, but I've kind of made an audience and I'm really proud to have this channel. But what's funny is the sense of competition and ego for my collection is something that's faded away a little bit within me. And that's actually a big reason why I don't show off my collection in my background, and it's something that I won't do. Because I've learned one of the biggest money saving tips is not comparing myself or placing self-worth on my collection, but rather learning to understand the experience of collecting. I love collecting because it brings me back to a time of my childhood and it connects me with great memories. It's also allowed me to meet a lot of amazing people. And learning this is really important because you may have a friendship group that collects and then they drop serious money on cards and you may feel inadequate. And then they may be talking about the cards they bought a few years ago that have all doubled or tripled in price, and then you want to keep up. Though take this video as a lesson because you never need to really do that, and collecting needs to be a personal experience and one that helps you grow as a person. Hobbies should elevate us, not make us feel less of ourselves. Though, ego with collecting is always there, and keeping a check on it is very important if you want to save money. It's also important to know that loving the hobby is key. For me, my passion for the Pokemon TCG comes from how much I enjoy the Pokemon games. And I even dive deep into Pokemon gaming topics on my second channel called Philip's Trick Room. In one video, I ranked every Pokemon game on a tier list. You can find a link for the channel in the video's description. Now, habit number 3 is mastering patience in this hobby. Having patience is more valuable than a PSA 10 Moonbrown. And what I mean by that, patience is the key area in the hobby that you want to master. I mean, I've been creating content here for a while, and cards that were super hyped earlier have all fallen off a cliff. And then, if you get sucked into these hype trains, you will constantly be chasing your tail. There's just a real art in learning patience. When a new card or a new set releases, everyone gets super excited to purchase that card, and it has a lot of media covering it. You've got a lot of YouTubers talking about it. You got people on all social media platforms talking about a specific card or a specific chase. But the thing that happens, and you'll see it more often than not, as the era continues, as a new set comes, a new shiny toy takes the spotlight. And then something that seemed incredible back then doesn't even feel like it's that amazing anymore. We've already seen this with the Sword and Shield era. When we think of the Darkness Ablaze Charizard or the Vivid Voltage Pikachu, how many people still want those cards desperately in their collection? Like when we're talking about that today, you'd have a very small amount of people who really want those cards. But back in the day when those cards released, everyone wanted them. There was a lot of media around those cards. Hype was building around those cards. People wanted them in their collections. And the key to collecting is not about, buying those cards straight away, or, you can see that there's so much demand and you're going to think you're going to miss out. Learn the art of patience, learn to save for it and have one goal. The problem with collecting is it's a moving target. And the habit you want to get into when it comes to collecting is understanding that if you have a big goal, try focus on that. Now, a good way to understand if you want a specific card. So for me, right, I really wanted a PSA 10 Greninja. When it came out, I was like, dude, I love this card. I really want it in my collection. It's such an awesome card. I want this card. And then a few months later, I still wanted the card. I looked back and I'd be like, man, you know what? Every time I talk about this Greninja, I want it in my collection. And then I said, you know what? It's time I buy the card. Now, the reason why I knew it was a good decision, because if I wanted the card for such a long amount of time, that means there's genuine demand from me for that card. But I've also seen some cards that I think are really cool, and then when they release, I'll go, wow, I really want that card. And then as a few months pass, I'm not really that interested. One of them was the Raging Bolt from Prismatic Evolutions. When that came out, I was like, man, I want that card so bad in my collection. But now when I'm thinking about it, I think, it would be nice if it was in my collection, but it's not something that I really want or I really want to add it. So that's why by learning and waiting out, you'll see that your preferences can change. And if you still want a card 6 or 8 months after release, then you can say, hey, you know what? It's good that I waited because I can see that this is something I genuinely want to add in my collection. So mastering patience is key because you will make the right decisions. Now, habit number 4 is learn to read hype trains in the hobby. They happen every other week. So one thing that's a bit frustrating is the amount of collectors that have been around here for a few years who still get sucked into hype trains. Now, if you're new and you get fooled by a hype train, then just take it as a key lesson and then move forward, and then life goes on, and then the next time another one comes, don't get sucked in. Though if you're falling for hype trains every time they come around and you've been here for over a year, that's when you really need to begin refining your skills and learning how to balance your emotions when it comes to this hobby. Yes, it's true that some cards can rise and then they can stay at that price point, and if you miss your boat, then well, your boat's gone. So you do need to get into the habit of learning the behavior of hype trains. Pokemon collecting is very weird, and we're in a very new era where a lot of cards reach their highest points in the market only during their hyped periods. What I mean by this is think of cards like the Golden Zacian and Zamazenta from Sword and Shield base, or the Golden Snorlax from Chill and Rain. A lot of these cards were once the top chase cards of an era. Like, these were the actual grails for an era at one point. Though right now, a lot of these cards are at the lowest point in their market. If you get fooled by every hype train, you're just going to purchase all these cards at the top of the market. That's why it's really important to learn how to balance collecting and just see how it kind of behaves. Hype trains are always going to be there, but I have noticed that especially in the last few years, a lot of cards, like I mentioned, they get their highest point in the market only during the hype train. And then there's only very few cards that start climbing above those high points years later. And that way you won't always get fooled when a new hype train comes, because they're very common. In fact, even as I'm making this video, I can guarantee whether it's going to be next week or a week after, there's going to be a new hype train for a new type of card, and people will jump on it, and and then they spend a crazy amount of money because they couldn't wait it out. So that's why just understand, if something spikes too quickly, it's likely that it will come down the exact same way. Though as much as the Pokemon hobby is changing, I think the heart of collecting comes down to how special the connection with certain cards can be. For example, my love for cards came from when I was a young kid and just loving Pokemon games. And it's actually funny because I actually tried to revisit that nostalgic journey. I actually purchased Pokemon Coliseum on the GameCube, and I tried to send a Pokemon from the GameCube all the way to the Nintendo Switch 2. And if you're thinking, wait, how is that even possible? Well, you can see that journey in this video here. In this video on screen, I go over that 20-year journey. This is on my second channel called Philip's Trick Room. Feel free to watch that video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next video.